It's all you need, and it's all around. It is in the air, every sight and every sound. You can't buy it, and you can't hurry it. It is everlasting, endless, groovy, and deep. Black Eyed Peas are trying to find it. Meatloaf would do anything for it. Led Zeppelin has a whole lot of it. Beyonce is crazy in it. Foreigner wants to know what it is and wants you to show them. J-Lo's don't cost a thing. Maroon 5 is under its control, and Elvis prefers his tender. Of course, I'm talking about love. Love is one of the most spoken about concepts in our modern world, and yet it is the least understood. And with the echoes of everyone from Martika to Justin Timberlake ringing in our heads, what does love really mean? And what does love got to do with it? In 1 Corinthians 13, we start to find our answers. It is in this passage that seeks to give us a crystal clear definition of what true love is, and what love is as a Christian, what we should be doing. Now, we are in the middle of looking at 1 Corinthians as a series. We hit 1 Corinthians 13, but we must remember the context of this thing of love. For most often, this chapter is taken out of its context to the Corinthian church. But we must remember that Paul is dealing with a church service that was doing more harm than good. In verse 17, in chapter 11, he says, it's better that you don't go to church because when you do, you're causing so much issues. And the issue that Paul is dealing with in 1 Corinthians 12 to 14 is the way that they were doing spiritual gifts. For they were using the gifts of prophecy and of knowledge and of tongues, but they were doing it for themselves. Not for the building up of the church, but rather for the spotlight on themselves to show how good they were, to flaunt it in front of everyone. And Paul says, no, you're doing it wrong. The way you need to use these gifts, the way you need to serve, is to be done so in love. See, this passage, 1 Corinthians 13, is a very big wedding passage. I've preached about 7 or 8 weddings in my life, and 4 of them have been on this passage. And I actually preached this for Ben and Carla at their wedding, and they might notice some of my analogies which I stole from that sermon and put in this one. But this is a very big wedding verse. But we must be aware, and that is an appropriate use. That's a good, legitimate use of using love in the wedding context. But that's not why Paul wrote it. Paul didn't write it as a treaty on marriage. Paul didn't write it in order to be only trotted out at the celebration of marital bliss. Paul wrote it to a church in chaos, a church in disorder, a church in disorder that was de-glorifying God. And so it's easily applied to us in the church, for that is who it was written for. That we, in our actions, in our service, in our ministry, that we would predominantly first love. And everything we do needs to be saturated in that. So the passage technically starts in chapter 12, verse 31b. And now I will show you the most excellent way. After saying that they are doing it wrong, Paul is now saying, well, I'll show you how to do it right. The most excellent. This term from Greek is actually the word hyperbole, which where we in English get our term hyperbole, which means amazing, great, beyond belief. You're doing it wrong, church. This is how to do it right. Love. Love is the first fruit of the Spirit mentioned in Galatians 5. And as such, if we live by the Spirit, if we have the Spirit inside us, then by definition we will exude and show and express the fruits of the Spirit. The most important one of them being love. And love then is not just a gift. The fruits of the Spirit all can be used by everyone. They're not just for some, like the gifts are. The fruit are to be reflected in all our lives. In our lives, we are to reflect all of them. And then Paul starts and gets into the key theme of the first 3 passages, which is the importance and significance of love. Verse 1. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mystery and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but I don't have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Heaps of people have tried to identify the two musical instruments of the gong and the cymbals. The cymbals were used in times of worship, and so they understand that, but we're not quite sure what the gong is. But needless to say, the idea behind it is unnecessary noise, just loud air horn-like quality that is loud but pointless, loud but meaningless, loud but hollow, without weight. And then this idea of if I surrender my body to the flame, it's pointing to the possibility of martyrdom being a spiritual gift. The idea of giving of our lives because of our faith, which many people had to do in the early church, but many people still do today in the modern church in different countries, not particularly in the West. The idea then also was that if I give all I possess to the poor, that is, selling everything I have, like Ananias and Sapphira claimed that they did in the book of Acts. So the idea here is that the church is doing the spiritual gifts. They're doing what we would call good things. They're giving, they're sacrificial. They're using the gifts of prophecy, gifts of faith, but they're doing so without love. And as a result of them doing good things, but without love, they have nothing. They gain nothing. I am nothing. It is vacuous, vacant, blank, pointless, barren, futile, aimless, insignificant, impotent, rubbish, irrelevant, inconsequential, frivolous, negligible. The use of gifts without love is nothing. For that is what the church was doing. But at the same time, that's what we can do too. We can do good things, but do so without the right motivations. Do so without care for others. Do so with the idea of being more about me than about thee. And Paul is saying, no, don't do anything if you're going to do that. We need to serve. We need to minister. We need to use our gifts, first and foremost, out of love. Otherwise, we are nothing but an incessant air horn. Loud noise with no meaning, no weight. Now, this isn't to say that we don't use our gifts till we get it perfect. I won't be a youth leader until I can really love those kids the way God wants me to. It's not saying we have to be perfect before we do it, but that definitely has to be the lens in which we which we seek to strive to view our ministries, to view our service towards God. That we try and drench everything we do in love, and we will fall because we are sinful, but that is our goal, that is our direction, that is our aim, to love. We don't do our rosters, we don't do the kitchen, we don't do maintenance, we don't do the gardens, we don't do up here just be about me. We do it out of love and willing to serve others. We don't cook for 20 kids on a Friday night so that they will know how awesome I am, though they do. Thank you, Crystal. Lasagna was amazing. But it's about her showing love. It's about us showing love to others and using those gifts for their benefit, not our own. Then after promoting the significance and importance of love in verse 1 to 3, Paul then goes on to define what love actually is. And this raises a huge point for us, a huge issue, For in our modern culture, love as a term has been watered down to the point of ridiculousness. We keep using that word, but I do not think it means what you think it means. Pop culture, literature, music, advertising, they use the word love in terms of that which benefits the self, in that which gets you what you need, that which promotes you, that which is fleeting, that which is carefree, that which is a feeling, that which is hollow, that which is without weight. A pop musician, as they leave the concert stage, yells out to everyone, "I love you all." They don't know their names. They've never done anything remotely loving for them in their life. But still the word love is shouted out. In romantic comedies, one character tells another, "I just don't love you anymore. I've fallen out of love with you." Like love is some contagious virus or disease that you can be cured from. Like it's something you can just lose rather than being something that you choose. In a newly released movie, the wife tells her husband that she loves him and then that night goes and has an affair with someone else. And at the Oscars last week, Will Smith physically assaulted Chris Rock. And then in his acceptance speech, attempted to justify it by saying, love makes you do crazy things. Love is not an excuse for violence. That is not love. See, our modern culture uses the term love to mean just about anything except what the Bible uses it to mean. Love, yeah, until it becomes uncomfortable. Love, sure, but stop when it starts to cost you something. Love until I just don't want to do it anymore. Love because you're not giving to me what I want to be given. Love with a gigantic escape clause if I don't feel like it anymore. Love until I realise how different you are from me. Love until, nah. But that is not God's love. That is not love that Christ shows us. And it's definitely not the love that's talked about in the Bible in 1 Corinthians 13. So then, what is this Bible love? Well, the first thing I think we note when we look at verses 4 to 7 is in the immortal words of DC Talk, love, love, love is a verb. It's a doing word. It's an action. Verse 4. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. The first thing we note is that the words used to define love are not adjectives. They are verbs. They are doing words. They are used to promote action. Love can be defined only by what it does or does not do. Love is not a feeling. It's not a warm and fuzzy emotion that we get inside towards another, but rather it is action-based, not emotion-based. Love is a verb. Okay, well then let's start to break that down. Love is patient, long-suffering, willing to tolerate the shortcomings of others because we know we have faults too. Love is okay when things aren't going your way. Love doesn't cut and run. Love sticks. Love waits. This is the passive aspect of love, but there is also an active aspect of this, for love is kind, actively being nice, responding calmly to others with a tender heart and forgiveness. The Message version puts it as, love cares more for others than for the self. Then it continues, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. Envy is intense negative feelings over someone else's achievement or success. In the words of Harry, when Harry met Sally, it's, I want what they're having. I want it. I don't want them to have it. I want it to be mine. It does not boast. And this continues this idea of envy, but rather it focuses on what one has. Oh, look at what I have. Look at how amazing it is. Look, everyone, and marvel at my brilliance. Well, that's not love. Love is not proud. Love is not arrogant. Love does not have a swelled head. I love the Message translation for this. Love doesn't strut. Love doesn't do the catwalk of, yeah, I'm good. That's right, I am. That is not love. For it is not proud. It does not boast. Then verse 5, it continues. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Rude means to behave indecently or shamefully or intentionally say something that the other person will go, oh my goodness, and hide their head in shame. I'm kind of looking forward to that moment where I get to embarrass my kids, particularly in high school. But I need to remember this passage when I do so, for love does not intentionally embarrass. That love doesn't make them feel, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's my dad. Though I'm sure they have already felt that in their lifetimes. Don't ask Sam about that later. The verse continues, love is not self-seeking, does not attempt to advance my own interests at the sake of yours, at your expense. I can throw you under the bus so that I can get further into whatever area I want to do. Well, that again is not love, for love is not self-seeking. It's not about your rights. It's about their rights. It's not about your way. It's about their way. It's not about you pushing what you want first and foremost. It's about you caring and looking about what they want, not yelling for your own position. And then love is not yelling in the sense that it is not easily angered. That is to be cantankerous or to be irritated, frustrated, exasperated. It does not do these ones, at least not easily. And then the passage kind of rounds up and says it keeps no record of wrongs. Imagine this scene. You're in the house, in the lounge room, watching Survivor with your spouse, and they turn to you and say, honey, can you please take the bins out? Because the truck will come in the morning, and if we don't, the bins overflow, and we'd love that not to happen. And to which you respond, yes, I will do that right after this show. To which she responds, no. Because you said that in 2004, June the 2nd at 4:15, you said that and you didn't do it, and then the truck came in the morning and the bins were overflowing and we got cockroaches, and then no, you said you would do that. And you said it again in 2012, May the 5th. And you said it again in 2017, June 14th. No way are we going to do this. You have to do it now. To which you reply, hypothetically, I'll go and do it now. See, whenever I use that kind of argument with my wife, it's always to win the argument, to prove myself right, so that I can be the winner and she can be the other one. But that is not love. That is not putting them first, that's putting me first. For love keeps no record of wrongs. Paul then wraps it up by saying it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love is always. There's no off switch in love. There's no timeouts. There's no safety. There's no bar like in a game of chasings in the primary school playground. It doesn't come and go. It's not like a strobe light on and off and on and off and on and off. No, love is always on. It is the Energizer Bunny of the emotional world. It doesn't just fade. It doesn't blink off. It is always. Love perseveres. See, in these verses, if you take the negative characteristics that Paul talks about love and you remove the not, what you get is a vivid portrait of how the life in the Corinthian church was and how they were treating each other. Envious, boasting, arrogant, rude, self-seeking, easily offended, looking to see what others were doing wrong. But this is the anti-love that Paul is trying to curtail. True love, biblical love, is not these things. For true love, biblical love, is not about me. It is about them. It is about the other. So love is a verb. And the other defining feature of these two verses that define love is that it's not about me, it is about them, for that is true biblical love. And this is not easy, and it's not comfortable, and it's not always pleasant, and it definitely doesn't come without a personal cost. If you are loving someone and it doesn't hurt, then you are doing it wrong, or you just haven't done it for long enough. But this is what love is. It is an action, it's definitely not a feeling, for love is more than that. Then Paul kind of finishes in this last section in this chapter by focusing on the permanence of love, particularly in contrast with the temporary nature of the gifts. For Paul is talking about that the gifts will stop when Christ returns, but love continues into eternity. We see this verse 8, love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. Now, this first bit, love never fails, it always gets me a little bit worried because I love my family, but I definitely fail. I've eaten the last Oreo before offering it to Grace. I love my kids, but I have refused to watch Barbie Mermaid Magic for the 8th time. I've refused that, and I said maybe we can watch something else. When faced with the option of doing the dishes or playing Switch, the Nintendo wizardry wins far too often. I have failed in my love to my family, but does that mean I don't love them? Well, that's not actually what Paul is meaning by this statement. Rather, what he is saying is, if you have a choice, love will never be the wrong one. Love never falls. The Greek word for fail here is pipto, which means falls. And so it's never a bad option to love. If you're in a scenario and you can love, then if you do love, you haven't made the wrong decision. That's kind of what Paul is referring to here. Then in verse 8, 3 gifts are noted. They are prophecy, tongues, and knowledge. And they're kind of specified because these are the ones that the Corinthian church was having the most issue with. And Paul says these will stop. Now, this has taken some to believe that spiritual gifts are no longer active in the modern church. This position is called cessationism. This idea, and it comes, if we can go to that slide, Ben, this idea comes from the idea from these passages, but I don't think it's a correct reading of these passages. For when Paul says that these gifts will cease, he's not referring to the fact that they will cease after the first century of the church, which is what this position states. This position would argue that after the first century of the church, God does not use spiritual gifts anymore in this way. There is no longer healings or miracles or speaking in tongues or prophecies or words of wisdom. We don't have to worry about that because they have ceased to occur in the church. But that is not a correct reading of this scripture. And that is also not a correct understanding of experience, because we have seen miracles, we have seen prophecies, we have seen words of knowledge. And you may not have, but then please talk to me or someone else who possibly has. These gifts still are active in our world, and we must not use these verses to say what we are more comfortable with them saying. I was in a church where the senior pastor had this position, and I struggled with that because it's not my reading of these passages. It's not my reading of the Spirit's activity in our lives. Okay, so Paul is saying that that love is more important than the spiritual gifts, because the spiritual gifts will cease when Christ returns, but the gift of love, the fruit of love, will continue. So love is important, for without it I am nothing, a resounding gong. And we must define and view love as the Bible defines it, as a verb, not a feeling, as self-sacrificial, as costing. And love is permanent, in contrast to the other gifts, which are temporary. But now I want to use our last time section here just to go a little bit deeper then on, well, how do we show this love? Well, like we've talked a little bit about it, but then how can we actually apply it? How do we love in our world? And I think the best way to do this is we follow the leader. We follow the Son. We love like Jesus loved. And we see how he loved in Romans 5:8. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The Son being referred to here is the historical figure of Jesus Christ. Jesus the Jew, the carpenter, the young man who had brothers and sisters, and Jesus who was fully God and yet at the same time was fully man. Jesus who was in heaven but came down to earth, was mocked, betrayed by his mates, and persecuted by the church. He came to serve. And he was sent by God for our benefit because he loved us. The love that Jesus showed to us, dying on a cross, was not about him. It was about us. And then as we start to think about applying love to others, we must take a note out of Christ's book, that we would love as he has loved. For through his death and resurrection, he has given us the opportunity of forgiveness, of redemption, of atonement, of an eternity in heaven with him, of everything that we do not deserve because of our sin. But because of Christ, the wrath of God was laid on him and not on us. He took the punishment so that we don't have to. And that is the kind of love that we are to show others. Okay, but then what does that look like? Well, I'll tell you three things that it's not. The first is, it's not the if kind of love. I will love if. Christ died for you, regardless of whether you accept him or not. His love for you is not dependent on your response to him. And what's more is there's nothing you have done to deserve it, nothing you could do to deserve it. You don't complete pilgrimages or have to do tasks. You just need to turn and accept Jesus Christ, who died for you, is unconditional. No strings attached, no legal loopholes. Then the way that we are to show love needs to be along those lines. It's not, I will love if you make me happy. I will love my neighbour if they cut their lawn regularly and keep their bins nice and tidy. I will love my colleagues if they do their work, they don't spend too much time regaling their tales of the weekend to me, and they never touch my lunch in the fridge. I will love my family if they don't yell at me, always do what I ask, and keep their room tidy. Love if is not the love Christ shows us. The love Christ shows us is unconditional, no strings. And therefore we are to show love to others unconditional, no strings, no ifs. It's easy to love based on performance, based on what you do or do not do, but that is not the love of Christ. That is not the love of Corinthians. That is not the love that we should be showing. The second kind of thing that love is not the love when. Love when you're feeling like it. When everything is roses, when you're healthy and well rested. For this, we look at the Garden of Gethsemane. He's just been betrayed by one of his closest mates that he did 3 years of his life with. He's asked his disciples to stay awake to pray for him, and they've fallen asleep time and time again. He is so anxious that he is sweating blood because he knows what is coming. Christ at that moment didn't feel like loving us. He didn't feel the warm and fuzzies inside. He felt the horror and dread that was about to come his way. And still, he said, "Not my will, but your will. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to. I don't feel like it, but I'm going to." In the same way, that is to be how we love. Not love when everything is right. I'll love you when I haven't gotten up at 2 a.m. because one of my children has weed their bed, and then I'm so stressed about the rest of the week that I couldn't go back to sleep. I'll love you when I get 8 hours sleep and I've had my morning coffee, then we can talk. That's not what Christ did. It's not what we should do. We need to love when jobs are lost. Love when self-identity is being questioned. Love in ill health. Love when failure is regular. Love always. The third kind of love that this kind of love is not but love. In the words of Meatloaf, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Love with restrictions, love with boundaries, love, don't cut into the me time. Don't you understand? I'm playing the Switch. I'm watching this Netflix. Bridgerton's back on. I'm really focused here. No, I'll just let that phone call go to voicemail. I don't want to show love to them now. It's restricting on me. And there are times where we do need to have healthy boundaries. There are times where we do need to say no. Do need to say that this is not a helpful kind of love. And there are some times where we need to do hard love. We need to have those interventions. We need to say what you are doing is not okay. I need to go hard on this because it's not in line with the Bible. It's not in line with God's will for your life, and it needs to stop. And if that means we need to separate relationship, at times that is required. It doesn't mean we are walked over like a wallflower. We are not a doormat as Christians, but at the same time, often we go, I will love you up to a point until it becomes hard for me. And that is not Christ's love, because nothing was off limits for him. When he died, he didn't say, well, I love you, but not death. No, he gave everything he was for us. And so then we are to do so for others. The Good Samaritan comes into mind. That Good Samaritan went the extra yards. He went the extra steps. He gave huge amounts of money. He got dirty. He cleaned a guy that he shouldn't even touch. He put it on his donkey. He had to walk, and he did all that because he loved. Christ goes, go and do likewise to someone who was their enemy. How do we love? We love with no ifs. We love with no whens. We love with no buts. And sometimes we have to be wise in how we show love. And yes, we do need to have boundaries at some stages in our life. And I'm not saying that. Because again, this passage has been used to allow violence and abuse in the church. And that is not healthy. And that is not what Christ wants. But too often we say, I love you, but. I love you if. I love you when. We are to love as Christ loved. Sacrificially. Painfully. Snow Patrol, when referring to the words love, say these 3 words are said too much, they are not enough. And you're right, saying the words is not enough. We must actually back it up with a biblical and true understanding of what love is in light of Christ's love for us, and then show that to those around us. Please, will you pray with me? Dear Lord, I ask that you would bring to mind someone this week that we can love. Truly love, sacrificially love, painfully love, awkwardly love, uncomfortably love. That you would enable us to have the echoes of Christ's love for us in our mind and reflect that to others. I pray, Lord, that you would bring it to mind. I pray, Lord, that you would nudge us at the right time. I pray, Lord, that you remind us of these words of 1 Corinthians 13 in that scenario so that we can love like you loved us. And enable that to start to be a habit and form a habit in our lives of loving others in the way that you have loved us. Loving others with verbs. Loving others sacrificially, always, permanently. Help us to do that, Lord. And help us to be motivated to do this kind of love based on what you have first done for us. That while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. In your name, amen.